The rhythmic pulse of Afrobeat music filled the air at Club Mirage, the most exclusive nightclub in Lagos. Bathed in neon lights and drenched in an intoxicating mix of perfumes and alcohol, the club was alive with energy. The star of the show was Zara, a mesmerizing dancer whose presence commanded the room. Her movements seemed almost otherworldly, her emerald green eyes locking with every patron she passed. Men whispered about her allure, while women envied her charm. But what truly set Zara apart wasn't her beauty, it was the rumors. Several customers had vanished after spending a night with her, leaving no trace. Adisa Oni, an investigative journalist known for his fearless exposés, watched from a corner table, nursing a glass of soda. He had heard the whispers too, stories of a succubus who preyed on men and spirited them away. Adisa wasn't one for urban legends, but the growing list of missing persons tied to the club demanded attention. His editor had been reluctant, dismissing the tale as sensationalism, but Adisa couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his gut. As Zara swayed on the stage, Adisa's resolve solidified. He would uncover the truth, no matter where it led, or how dangerous it became. The next morning, Adisa sat at his cluttered desk, surrounded by stacks of police reports and newspaper clippings. Each file chronicled a missing person connected to Club Mirage. There was Tunde, a promising law student, Adewale, a wealthy entrepreneur, and even Kola, a married man whose wife had pleaded on live television for his safe return. All had vanished without a trace. Yet, the connection between their disappearances and Zara was purely anecdotal. No concrete evidence linked her to the cases. Adisa leaned back, running a hand through his short, coiled hair. His instincts told him there was something more to the stories, but the journalist in him craved proof. He opened his laptop and typed Club Mirage disappearances into the search bar. Most articles echoed the same rumors he'd heard, but one blog post stood out. It was written by an anonymous source claiming to have escaped Zara's clutches. The post described a chilling experience, a night of bliss that turned into a nightmare, with fleeting memories of shadows and suffocating darkness. Adisa jotted down the blog's details, deciding to track its author. If there was even a sliver of truth to their story, it could be his first real lead. But something about the post sent a chill down his spine. The final line read, "She let me go, but she warned me, no one escapes twice." Adisa's first lead took him to a cybercafe in the heart of Lagos, where he hoped to trace the anonymous blog post. The cafe owner, a wiry man with sharp eyes, wasn't too keen on helping until Adisa slipped him a wad of naira. With a smirk, the man retrieved the IP address linked to the blog. It belonged to a small apartment in Surulere. When Adisa arrived, the building looked abandoned, its windows shattered and graffiti staining the walls. He pushed open the creaky door and called out, but no one answered. Inside, he found signs of a hasty departure, scattered papers, an overturned chair, and a half-empty cup of tea still sitting on a table. Among the mess was a notebook. The pages contained frantic scrawls, warning of Zara's power and detailing rituals she performed. One passage stood out: Zara isn't just a woman, she's a vessel. Her hunger is insatiable, and her master demands tribute. As Adisa flipped through the notebook, a noise startled him. He turned sharply to find the doorway empty, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Clutching the notebook, he left the apartment, unaware that his investigation had already drawn Zara's attention. Back at Club Mirage, Zara moved like a goddess among mortals, her every step choreographed to capture attention. Adisa sat at the bar, blending into the lively crowd. He had traded his usual investigative look for a sharp blazer, aiming to observe unnoticed. The thrum of the music was hypnotic, but Adisa kept his focus on Zara. She was no ordinary performer. Her presence was magnetic, her movements almost predatory. As Zara danced, their eyes met. For a fleeting moment, Adisa felt a strange pull, as though she could see straight into his soul. Then she smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a chill down his spine. He knew this wasn't just a game of seduction. There was something deeply unsettling about her. "Beautiful, isn't she?" a bartender said, sliding Adisa his drink. Adisa nodded, feigning indifference. "She has the whole room under her spell." The bartender smirked. "Zara's like that. Some say she's a blessing for the club, but others, well, they say things I'd rather not repeat." Adisa leaned in. "Like what?" The bartender hesitated, then muttered, "She brings them in, but some don't come out. If you're smart, you'll keep your distance." Adisa sipped his drink, his resolve hardening. Zara wasn't just a dancer, she was the key to the disappearances, and he was going to prove it. The more Adisa watched Zara, the clearer it became that her charm wasn't just natural, it was supernatural. Determined to gather evidence, he spent the following day preparing a hidden recording device and researching protective charms. Though skeptical of superstition, Adisa wasn't willing to take unnecessary risks. That evening, Club Mirage buzzed with energy, its patrons unaware of the growing danger in their midst. Adisa positioned himself near a dark corner, where he could observe Zara without drawing attention. She danced with her usual mesmerizing grace, but tonight, Adisa noticed something different. Her focus seemed sharper, almost as if she were hunting. Near midnight, Zara singled out a man in the crowd, a well-dressed banker who couldn't seem to take his eyes off her. Adisa followed as Zara led the man toward a private VIP room, her hand trailing along his arm like a whisper of wind. Once they entered, Adisa waited, his heart pounding. Minutes passed, then silence. When Adisa peeked into the room, it was completely empty. The man was gone, with no trace of where or how he'd left. Zara's words from the night before echoed in his mind. Careful where your curiosity takes you. This wasn't just a story, it was a deadly game, and Adisa had just stepped into its heart. Adisa left Club Mirage with more questions than answers. The disappearance he'd witnessed confirmed his suspicions, but how could he explain it without sounding like a madman? He played the recording from his hidden device, hoping for a clue. Static filled the playback, interspersed with faint, otherworldly whispers that sent chills down his spine. Determined to uncover the truth, Adisa returned to the notebook he had retrieved from the abandoned apartment. One passage caught his eye. To witness her truth, one must enter the void. The phrase was cryptic, but it hinted at something beyond the physical. Adisa decided to dig deeper into Zara's origins. He traced her earliest appearances to a smaller, now-closed club on the outskirts of Lagos. Locals referred to the club as cursed, with several disappearances reported during its operation. Speaking to an elderly bartender who had worked there, Adisa learned of a mysterious ritual performed the night Zara first arrived. They said she came out of nowhere, the man whispered, his voice trembling. The owner thought she was a gift from the gods. But people started vanishing, and we knew she was something else entirely. Adisa thanked the man and left, feeling the weight of the story he was chasing. Zara wasn't just dangerous, she was ancient, and whatever power she wielded wasn't easily undone. Adisa couldn't shake the bartender's words as he drove home. Zara's arrival at the now-abandoned club seemed to mark the beginning of a dark chapter in Lagos nightlife. The more he pieced the timeline together, the more he realized her appearances weren't random. Each club she performed at experienced a surge in popularity, followed by a string of disappearances and, ultimately, its closure. The next day, Adisa visited the site of the old club. It was a crumbling structure, overgrown with weeds and graffiti. Inside, the air was damp, and the smell of decay lingered. Adisa found remnants of the club's past, dusty chairs, shattered mirrors, and a faded poster of Zara. Her image, though worn, still exuded an eerie allure. Exploring further, Adisa discovered a hidden room behind the bar. Inside was an altar adorned with burnt-out candles, animal bones, and strange symbols painted on the walls. Among the items was a book, its pages filled with diagrams and chants written in an unfamiliar language. He photographed everything and took the book. As he left, Adisa felt a chilling presence, as though unseen eyes were watching him. Whatever Zara was, it was tied to something ancient and sinister, and he was now entangled in her web. Back at his apartment, Adisa examined the book he'd taken from the hidden room. Though most of the text was incomprehensible, he recognized one word repeated several times, Yemajar. After some research, he discovered it was linked to Yoruba mythology, referring to a spirit that fed on human vitality. Adisa began connecting the dots. Zara wasn't just an ordinary succubus, she was a vessel for Yemajar, a being summoned to provide wealth and power in exchange for lives. The rituals described in the book detailed how the summoner must offer a steady stream of tributes to maintain the spirit's favor. The discovery left Adisa both horrified and fascinated. If Chief Okon had truly summoned Yemajar, Zara wasn't acting alone. She was part of a larger, darker scheme. But confronting Chief Okon directly was dangerous. Adisa needed proof, something undeniable to expose the horrors behind Club Mirage. As he prepared to dig deeper, His phone buzzed with a message: "Stop, or you'll regret it." The sender was unknown, but the implication was clear. Someone, or something, knew he was getting closer to the truth. Adisa stared at the message on his phone. The sender's number was blocked, and there was no way to trace it. But the chilling words left no doubt. Someone was watching him, someone who knew exactly what he was investigating. His heart raced as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth, it was about survival. He knew he couldn't back down now. The deeper he went into this mystery, the more entangled he became, but the more he understood that Zara and the club were only a part of something much larger. This was about ancient forces that had been thriving in the shadows for centuries. Adisa spent the next few days speaking to former employees of the club, but they were too afraid to say much. One of them, a woman named Titi, had worked as a waitress at the club. She told Adisa about the strange things she had seen, people going in, but never coming out the same. Their faces empty, eyes glazed. And the whispers she overheard about Zara being more than human. "They say she's not even alive, that she's some kind of spirit sent to collect souls for the gods," Titi whispered, looking around nervously as if the walls might be listening. Adisa took mental notes. He needed more than just hearsay to take down Chief Okon and Zara. But he was running out of time. That night, Adisa couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed. He had taken every precaution to cover his tracks, but the unsettling sensation persisted. As he walked to his car, a shadow moved from the corner of his eye. He spun around, but there was nothing there. Later, as he sat at his desk reviewing his notes, his phone rang. It was an unknown number again. Hesitant but determined, he answered. "Adisa," a voice said, smooth and cold, sending a shiver down his spine. "I've been watching you. You're digging too deep." It was Zara. Her voice was soft, yet carried an undeniable weight. "If you keep pushing, you'll find things that are better left buried," she continued. "There's no coming back from this. You can't undo what's already been set in motion." Adisa's mind raced. This was it, the point of no return. "What do you want from me?" Zara's laugh was chilling. "Nothing. But you should understand that some things in this world are beyond your comprehension. You cannot fight what has already been promised." Before Adisa could respond, the line went dead. He sat back in his chair, staring at the phone in disbelief. What did she mean by promised? What was this pact, and how did it involve him? He needed answers, and soon. Adisa's obsession with the case deepened. Every waking moment was consumed by thoughts of Zara, the cult, and the ancient power that seemed to guide everything. The more he learned, the more dangerous the path ahead became. He decided to confront Chief Okon directly. He was sure the man knew more than he was letting on. Armed with his evidence and the notebook filled with ritualistic details, Adisa visited Okon's mansion again, hoping to catch him off guard. The moment Adisa stepped inside, the air felt heavy, thick with the scent of incense and something else, something metallic. Okon greeted him with a forced smile, his eyes betraying none of the warmth he had shown during their previous meeting. "You're persistent, I'll give you that," Okon said, closing the door behind Adisa. "But you're asking questions that are dangerous." Adisa didn't hesitate. "I know what you've done. You've been using Zara to summon Yemajar, haven't you? You're feeding souls to this spirit in exchange for power." Okon's face remained unreadable. "And what if I am? What's it to you?" Adisa stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "You've been sacrificing people for your own gain. This ends now." For a moment, there was silence. Then, Okon's lips curled into a sly smile. "You think you can stop this? You're too late. This is bigger than you. It's bigger than me. It's a force beyond our control." Adisa's stomach tightened. He had walked into the lion's den, and now he had to escape with the truth, or perish trying. Adisa left Chief Okon's mansion with a heavy heart. The encounter had left him more unsettled than ever. Okon's calm demeanor, even in the face of such accusations, had been unnerving. It was as though he wasn't afraid of being caught, as if the power behind him was untouchable. Adisa spent the next few days researching Yemajar further. The more he uncovered, the more he realized that this spirit wasn't merely a myth. It was a force deeply rooted in the spiritual history of Nigeria, one that had been invoked in ancient times for dark purposes. But nothing in his research prepared him for what came next. That evening, as Adisa walked home, he felt an intense pressure in the air. The streetlights flickered, and the wind grew cold, carrying with it an eerie whisper. He froze. The voice seemed to come from all directions, though no one was around. "You should have stayed away," the voice murmured. It was Zara's voice. Adisa's heart raced. The whisper was too close, too real. He spun around, but there was no one there. Only darkness. Then, a shadow moved in the alleyway ahead. Without thinking, Adisa sprinted toward it, his instincts pushing him forward. But by the time he reached the alley, the figure had vanished. All that remained was a strange symbol painted on the wall in what appeared to be blood. The symbol was unmistakable, a mark of summoning. Adisa barely slept that night. The vision of the symbol haunted him. Was it a warning? Or had Zara left it intentionally? He didn't know, but it was clear that he was being drawn deeper into a supernatural trap. The next day, he returned to Club Mirage, determined to confront Zara once and for all. But this time, he wasn't going to observe from the shadows. He needed answers, and he was prepared to do whatever it took to get them. Inside the club, the atmosphere was even more intoxicating than before. The music throbbed with an energy that felt almost alive. Zara was on stage, her movements hypnotic, pulling everyone's attention. But as Adisa approached her, he was met with a coldness in her eyes that made his blood run cold. "You've been asking too many questions," she said, her voice barely audible over the music. Adisa's heart pounded. "I know what you are. I know what you've done." Zara smiled, but it wasn't the warm smile of a dancer. It was a cruel, knowing grin. "You think you can stop me? You think you can stop Yemajar? You're already too late." Before he could respond, Zara stepped closer. Her presence was suffocating, as though she were pulling all the oxygen from the room. "You've crossed into a world where human laws no longer apply," she whispered. "You're mine now, Adisa. You always have been." Adisa staggered back, feeling as though his very soul were being tethered to hers. The room spun, and for a moment, he wasn't sure if he was still standing in the club or slipping into some otherworldly plane. Adisa's vision blurred, and the world around him seemed to warp. He felt as though he were falling deeper and deeper into an endless abyss. The air was thick, suffocating, and every breath was a struggle. His limbs felt heavy, as if he were being dragged through a dark, endless tunnel. When his senses finally returned, he found himself in a place unlike any he had ever seen. It was a vast, empty void, and Zara stood before him, her form glowing with an eerie light. Her eyes burned with an unnatural fire. "This is the realm of Yemajar," she said, her voice echoing around him. "It's where the spirit resides, and now, so do you." Adisa's mind raced. "This is a trap. You can't." Zara raised a hand, and the air around him crackled. "I already told you. You've already crossed the line. Now you must pay the price." Adisa's heart hammered in his chest. "What do you want from me?" Zara's smile grew wider. "What I want is for you to understand the power you've been meddling with. You've tried to uncover truths that were never meant for mortal eyes. You've poked the beast, and now it will devour you." A swirling darkness formed around him, and for the first time, Adisa truly felt fear. Zara wasn't just a seductress. She was a force of nature, a being beyond human comprehension. He had underestimated her power. In the depths of the void, Adisa struggled against the suffocating darkness, fighting for every breath. He could feel his strength waning, but in the stillness, he heard something, a voice, faint but familiar. It was the same voice he'd heard from the shadows the night before. "Adisa," the voice whispered, "you're not alone." He turned toward the voice, and there, emerging from the dark, was an old man, his face weathered and wise. He was dressed in traditional Yoruba attire, a necklace of beads around his neck. "Who are you?" Adisa asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I am Olu, a guardian of the spiritual realms," the man replied. "I have been watching you, trying to help you avoid the path of destruction." Adisa's heart skipped a beat. "You mean, this is all real?" Olu nodded. "Zara is not what she appears. She has been possessed by Yemajar, a spirit bound to the realm of shadows. She is a servant of death, and her role is to bring souls to the abyss." "But why me?" Adisa asked, struggling to comprehend the full scope of what he was hearing. Olu's gaze softened. "You were meant to uncover the truth. You have the power to stop this, but you must face Zara in her true form. You cannot fight her with mortal strength alone." Adisa nodded, feeling the weight of his destiny. There was no turning back now. Adisa's heart raced as Olu's words sank in. He was caught in the middle of something far beyond his comprehension, yet the truth was undeniable. Zara, the woman he had pursued for so long, was a pawn in a much darker game, a vessel for an ancient spirit that thrived on the souls of the unsuspecting. But the revelation also brought with it a terrible weight. "You have to face her," Olu said, his voice steady. "But you must be prepared. The spirit within her will stop at nothing to possess you, to break you." Adisa's thoughts raced. How could he face such a powerful entity? How could he fight something that wasn't even human? But as he looked into Olu's eyes, he saw the wisdom of someone who had lived through centuries, someone who had faced unimaginable horrors. "You can defeat her," Olu added, "but you must make a choice. You can return to the world you know, forget everything, and live your life. But the curse of Zara and Yemajar will continue, and more lives will be lost. Or you can embrace the path of the Guardian. Fight for those who are unaware, and become a part of the spiritual balance." The choice lay before him. It was a decision that would define the rest of his life. Adisa didn't need much time to make his decision. He had seen too much, learned too much, to turn back now. The lives at stake, those who had already vanished, and those who would follow if Zara and Yemajar were allowed to continue, were more important than his own safety. "I'll fight," Adisa said, his voice unwavering. "I won't let her hurt anyone else." Olu smiled, his face lighting up with a faint glimmer of approval. "Then you must prepare yourself, Adisa. The battle ahead will demand more from you than you could ever imagine. You must learn to wield the power that lies within you, and within the realms you now walk." The old man gestured to the air around them. Slowly, the dark void began to shift. Images of ancient symbols, forgotten rites, and powerful rituals filled the space. Adisa felt himself being pulled into this web of knowledge, as though the very fabric of existence was teaching him the skills he would need to confront Zara. As Olu's lessons washed over him, Adisa felt a change within himself. His senses sharpened. He could hear the whispers of spirits around him, feel the subtle vibrations of the world beyond. He was no longer just an investigative journalist. He had become a guardian of the unseen, a warrior against the darkness. When Adisa returned to the club, the atmosphere had changed. The lights flickered, and the music seemed distant, as if even the club itself could sense the shift in power. Zara was on the stage, her eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. Adisa approached her, his footsteps steady, his mind focused. The power he had gained through Olu's teachings was still fresh within him, but he knew he had to stay calm. This was it, the moment he would confront Zara and the spirit that controlled her. Zara's gaze met his, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, her lips parted into a smile that sent a chill down his spine. "You came back," she said, her voice thick with mockery. "Did you think you could stop what has already begun?" "I'm here to end this," Adisa replied, his voice firm. "I'm not afraid of you, Zara. And I'm not afraid of Yemajar." Her smile faded. With a sudden movement, she stepped off the stage, her body twisting unnaturally as she approached him. The air grew heavy, and the room seemed to distort, warping as though reality itself was bending under her influence. Adisa reached out, calling upon the power he had learned. His hands glowed with a faint light, a protective shield forming around him. Zara's expression twisted into a snarl. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Adisa. You can't fight me. You can't fight her. I don't need to fight you. I need to break the hold you've given to this spirit," Adisa said, his voice unwavering. "It ends now." The clash of their energies was overwhelming. Zara's form flickered between human and something more, an ancient being with an insatiable hunger. Her eyes burned with dark fire as she lashed out, but Adisa stood his ground, drawing on every ounce of spiritual energy he had gathered. "Yemajar!" Zara screamed, her voice now a guttural roar. "I summon you! Come to me!" For a moment, the air shimmered, and a figure began to materialize beside Zara, a dark, shadowy form that radiated an aura of pure malevolence. It was Yemajar, the spirit who had taken control of Zara's body, a being born of darkness and death. But Adisa was ready. He focused all his energy on the symbol Olu had shown him, an ancient seal that could bind Yemajar and sever her connection to Zara. He stepped forward, his hands raised, chanting the incantation in a language he had never spoken before. The words flowed from him, powerful and ancient, as the symbol glowed with a brilliant light. Zara screamed as the light enveloped her, her body writhing in pain. Yemajar's form began to dissipate, trapped within the seal. You can't," Zara hissed, her voice no longer her own. "I'll come back. You can't stop me." But Adisa's focus didn't waver. He continued the chant, binding the spirit until it could no longer maintain its hold on Zara. The air grew still as the dark energy faded, and the oppressive weight that had been hanging over the club lifted. Zara collapsed to the ground, her body trembling. The dark force that had once controlled her was no longer present. The room, which had been thick with malevolent energy, now felt strangely empty, as though the shadows had retreated to a far-off corner of the world. Adisa stood over her, breathing heavily, the power from the ancient ritual still coursing through his veins. For a moment, there was silence. Zara's eyes, once glowing with a supernatural fire, were now filled with confusion and fear. She struggled to rise, her body weak and unsteady. What did you do to me?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You're free," Adisa said, his voice calmer than he felt. "The spirit is gone. Yemajar has no hold over you anymore." Tears welled up in Zara's eyes as the weight of what had happened hit her. She had been a victim, just like the others, ensnared by a power she couldn't control. I didn't know what I was becoming," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought I was just dancing. But she wanted my soul." Adisa knelt beside her, offering her a hand. "You're free now, but you'll have to live with the consequences." Zara nodded silently, accepting his gesture of help as she stood. The reality of her situation had settled in. She had lost so much, but now she had the chance to make things right. The night after Zara's liberation, the club was quieter than usual. The music that once pulsed through the walls now felt like an echo of what had transpired. Adisa knew that the battle wasn't entirely over. The consequences of his actions would ripple far beyond that one moment. Zara, now safe from the grip of Yemajar, had chosen to leave the nightclub. She no longer wished to live in a world where she could be a pawn to darker forces. As she walked away from the life she once knew, Adisa couldn't help but feel a sense of sorrow for her. She had been both victim and perpetrator, caught in a web she hadn't woven. He left the club the following morning, his mind preoccupied with everything that had occurred. The information he had gathered, the spirits he had interacted with, and the horrifying truth of Yemajar's power weighed on him. But there was a sense of closure as well. For the first time, Adisa felt like he had truly made a difference. Still, something lingered in the air. The threat of Yemajar had not been eradicated completely. As Olu had warned him, the spirit would seek a way to return. The fight, it seemed, was far from over. Days passed, but Adisa could not shake the feeling that something was about to happen. He resumed his work as an investigative journalist, but the shadows of his recent experiences followed him everywhere. He had learned more about the spiritual realm than he had ever anticipated, and the weight of that knowledge threatened to consume him. One evening, while he was in his apartment, he received an unexpected visit. The doorbell rang, and when Adisa opened the door, there stood a figure he never thought he would see again, Olu. "You've been busy," the old man said, his voice calm yet heavy with urgency. "But your work is not finished." Adisa stepped aside to let him in, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Olu's face was grave as he spoke. "Yemajar's spirit is still restless. Zara may have been freed, but the entity is far from gone. She will return, and when she does, she will be stronger than before. Her hunger for souls is insatiable. She will not rest until she has claimed what was once hers." Adisa's blood ran cold. "What can we do?" Olu's gaze darkened. "There are deeper rituals that can bind Yemajar for good, but they come at a price. The cost is more than you may be willing to pay. You must decide if you are willing to sacrifice everything to end this, or if you will walk away, leaving others to face the consequences of your choices." Adisa clenched his fists, determined. I won't let this happen to anyone else. Olu nodded. Then prepare yourself. You are about to face a trial like no other. Adisa spent the next several weeks in intense preparation. The world of spirits, magic, and ancient rites had opened up to him in a way he couldn't ignore. Olu had provided him with the knowledge and tools he would need to perform a final ritual that could trap Yemajar forever. But there were dangers involved. The ritual required not just knowledge, but a willingness to make a personal sacrifice. Adisa would have to open himself to the spiritual forces around him and channel them through his own being. It was an excruciating process, one that would push him to his limits. As the night of the ritual approached, Adisa stood alone in a secluded part of Lagos, where the veil between the physical and spiritual realms was thinnest. The air was thick with anticipation, and the stars above seemed to shine brighter than ever. Olu was there, as well as a few other spiritual guardians who had agreed to help. "This is it," Olu said softly. "Once the ritual begins, there will be no turning back." Adisa nodded, his resolve firm. The past few weeks had been harrowing, and the thought of facing Yemajar again sent a chill down his spine. But he had made his choice. He would end this, no matter what it cost. As the ritual began, the world around Adisa seemed to disappear. The air grew colder, and the sounds of the city faded. It was as if he had entered another dimension, a place where only spirits existed. Yemajar's presence was palpable, her dark energy pressing in from all sides. From the shadows, her form materialized. Zara's face was still there, but it was no longer hers. Yemajar had fully taken control once again. Adisa stepped forward, his hands raised as he began the incantation Olu had taught him. He could feel the power of the spirits around him, flowing through him, as though they were lending him their strength. Yemajar laughed, her voice echoing through the void. "You think you can trap me? You are nothing but a mortal. Your magic is weak." But Adisa didn't flinch. He continued the chant, his words growing stronger. As the ritual reached its climax, a brilliant light surrounded him, and Yemajar shrieked, the dark energy around her struggling to maintain its form. "This ends now," Adisa shouted, pushing the power of the ritual to its peak. As the light from the ritual enveloped him, Adisa felt a surge of energy unlike anything he had experienced before. It was as if the very essence of the universe was flowing through him. The air hummed with power, and for a moment, he wondered if he was truly in control or if the spirits were guiding him. Yemajar, her face contorted with fury, fought to maintain her form. The once beautiful dancer was now a twisted reflection of herself, consumed by the dark spirit that had possessed her for so long. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly fire, and her voice reverberated with a chilling power. "You are nothing," Yemajar screamed, her voice a low growl that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. "I was born to rule, to claim what is mine. You cannot stop me." But Adisa, with every ounce of willpower, pushed forward. He could feel the power of the spirits backing him, their strength lending him the resolve to fight. He recited the final lines of the incantation, his words a clear command, a challenge to the entity that had controlled Zara for so long. The light intensified, brighter than 1,000 suns, and with one final resounding cry, Yemajar's form shattered into dust, scattering into the wind. The dark energy that had once clung to her dissipated, leaving only silence in its wake. Adisa collapsed to his knees, exhausted and gasping for breath. The light that had surrounded him slowly faded, and the oppressive weight of the spirit was gone. The world around him felt lighter, as if the darkness had lifted from the very air. Olu, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward, his face filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "It's done," he said quietly. Adisa looked up at the old man, his mind still reeling from the intensity of the battle. "Is she really gone?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Olu confirmed, nodding slowly. "For now, at least. The ritual has bound Yemajar, but spirits like hers can always find a way back. You have bought time. Time for Zara to rebuild her life, and for you to reclaim your own." Adisa took a deep breath, the weight of everything he had endured still heavy on his shoulders. "What happens now?" Olu's eyes were solemn. "Now, you return to your world. You continue your work. But remember, the spiritual realm is never far away. You may have won this battle, but there are many more to come." Adisa stood slowly, feeling the exhaustion in his limbs but also a sense of quiet triumph. "I'm ready," he said, his voice firm. "I'll be prepared." Weeks passed since the ritual, and life began to settle back into its familiar rhythm. Adisa had returned to his work as a journalist, but the weight of his experiences still lingered. He no longer saw the world in the same way. The line between the physical and spiritual realms was no longer a distant concept for him. It was real, and it was a force that he would have to continue to reckon with. Zara, too, was beginning to rebuild her life. She had left the nightclub behind, finding work as a dancer in a more conventional setting. She no longer felt the pull of the dark force that had once controlled her. It was as though she had been reborn, a new woman, free from the chains of the past. Adisa and Zara remained in contact, their bond growing stronger. She thanked him often for saving her, but Adisa never saw it that way. He had been the one to uncover the truth, but Zara had found her own strength. In many ways, she had been the one to save herself. As for Adisa, he had come to terms with the price of his victory. He had lost much in the process, the time, the energy, the peace of mind, but he had gained something more important. He had gained knowledge, strength, and a deeper understanding of the world around him. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Adisa felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. Months passed, and things seemed to return to normal. However, Adisa could sense that the world around him was still shifting. The spiritual realm, though temporarily quiet, had not been silenced. He could feel it, just beneath the surface, an undercurrent of energy waiting to burst forth. His encounters with the supernatural were not over. The investigation into Zara's past had opened doors to many other mysteries, and though he had closed the one involving Yemajar, there were others, lurking in the shadows. One evening, as he was leaving the office, he received a strange call. The voice on the other end was distorted, almost as if it was coming from a different world. "Adisa," the voice said, "your battle is far from over. The spirits are restless, and there are forces at work that you cannot yet understand. The time for peace is over. The next phase is about to begin." Adisa's heart skipped a beat. He had hoped for some semblance of normalcy, but the warning was clear. There was more to come. He hung up the phone, his resolve strengthening once more. His journey, it seemed, was just beginning. Days turned into weeks, and Adisa's life began to feel like a series of unending revelations. Everywhere he looked, there were signs that the world of spirits was far from finished with him. He had learned to trust his instincts, to listen to the whispers of the supernatural, and to respect the power it held. The strange call had set something in motion. Adisa began to investigate further, delving into old records, ancient texts, and interviews with spiritual leaders. He learned of a growing unrest in the spiritual realm, a movement led by an ancient entity far more dangerous than Yemajar. The whispers spoke of a new force rising, one that would challenge everything Adisa had come to know. He had thought Yemajar was the last of her kind, but now he understood the truth. The battle against the supernatural was not a solitary struggle. It was part of a much larger war, one that had been waged for centuries. The storm was coming, and Adisa knew that he would have to face it head-on. This time, however, he would not be alone. Zara, Olu, and others who had crossed his path would stand by him in the fight to come. The winds of change were picking up, and Adisa had no choice but to prepare for the fight of his life. The final confrontation was inevitable. Adisa had known it was coming, but nothing could have prepared him for the battle that lay ahead. The forces that had gathered against him were unlike anything he had faced before, ancient, powerful, and ruthless. Zara stood beside him, her presence a reminder of how far they had both come. She had reclaimed her life, but now she was part of something much larger, a force for good in the face of the darkness that threatened to consume the world. The ritual was ready, and Adisa could feel the weight of it on his shoulders. The power that had once been used to bind spirits was now his to command. But this time, he was not alone. The spirits of those who had fallen before him, those who had fought for justice, would be with him in this final battle. The reckoning was upon them, and Adisa was ready. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Kindly share, subscribe, and hit the bell button for more stories like this.